The daily code snippet. As stated previously, the background position property sets the initial position for each background image. The background position property also accepts the global values of inherit, initial, revert, and unset. The background position can be set in multiple ways. Using top left, bottom right indicates an edge against which to place it. Background position top, background position right, background position bottom, background position left, and background position center. Let's look at an example. Here is the HTML. We will load each option into a div with a class attribute that we can target with our CSS. And here is the CSS. We use the question mark because we have 4 options to test. So for example, hashtag edges1 would correspond to background position top. This is the result visually. Clockwise from the top left, we have top, right, bottom, and left. Center will center the image. Here is the HTML for our example, the CSS, and the visual result. We can also specify X and Y coordinates relative to the edges as percentages or other units. Up to 4 values are accepted. For 2 values, the first is the horizontal position and the second is the vertical position. For 4 values, the usual convention of top, right, bottom, and left is followed. Background position 30%, 70%, background position 0, 0, background position 40 pixels, 30 pixels, background position 10em, 4em. We will look at each of these examples. The HTML. The CSS, where again the question mark indicates, we will replace that with the 4 examples. And here's the visual result. We have 30%, 70% at the top left, 0, 0 at the bottom left, 40 pixels and 30 pixels at the top right, and 10em, 4em at the bottom right. We can also set the amount of offset from the edges. Background position bottom 40 pixels, right 30 pixels, background position right 10em, bottom 4em, background position bottom 40 pixels, right, background position top right 200 pixels. Here is the HTML for our 4 examples. And here's the CSS where again, the question mark indicates we will replace that information with the 4 examples. And here is the visual result. We have bottom 40 pixels, right 30 pixels, 30 pixels at the top left, right 10em, bottom 4em at the bottom left, bottom 40 pixels right at the top right, and top right 200 pixels at the bottom right. If there is more than one image, separate the values using commas. Background position 2em, 4em, comma, right. This is the HTML and CSS has been changed to load instructions for a second image. And this is how this would look on a browser. Let's look at the math behind setting the offset. The background image dimension is subtracted from the container dimension, and a percentage of the value is the offset from the edge. So if we subtract the image width from the container width and multiply that by the X position as a percentage, you will get the X offset value. Or we can take the container height minus the image height times the position Y in percent and get the Y offset value. Here is an example using an image that is 400 pixels wide and the container that is only 200 pixels wide. For the x-axis, 200 pixels minus 400 pixels is minus 200 pixels. If we multiply minus 200 pixels by minus 25%, we get 50 pixels. If we multiply it by 0, we get 0. If we multiply it by 25%, we get minus 50 pixels. If we multiply by 50%, we get minus 100 pixels. If we multiply by 75%, we get minus 150 pixels. And if we multiply by 100%, we get minus 200 pixels. And finally, if we multiply by 125%, we get minus 250 pixels. This is the HTML for this section. Since there are more examples than previous, we're splitting up the results to display as two columns. Our CSS has been modified so that the width of our container is constrained to 200 pixels to match the math we have just reviewed. The question mark indicates we have multiple options to try, and we will replace the background position with minus 25%, 0, 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%, and 125%. This is the visual result. We have minus 25% at the top left, 0 at the bottom left, 25% at the left, 50% at the center, which is equivalent to centering the image in the container, 75% at the right, 100% at the top right, and 125% at the bottom right. When an image does not completely fill the container with a background image, the remaining space is filled by the background color property. In addition, if the background image has a transparency or translucency, the background color will show through. The background size property also accepts the global values of inherit, initial, revert, and unset. It can have the following predefined values: background size cover and background size contain. Contain will scale the image as large as possible in its container without the image being stretched or cropped. If the container is larger, the image will tile unless the background repeat is set to no repeat. Cover will scale the image as large as possible to fill the container and will stretch the image if necessary. If the proportions of the image differ from the containing element, the image will be cropped vertically or horizontally to prevent any empty space. Here is the HTML of our demo file. We are using class attributes so that we can target individual divs with our CSS. And here is the CSS for contain. For the subsequent examples, we are keeping many of the variables the same. The only thing we will be changing is the background size property. This is the visual result. The image is scaled as large as it can be in the container without distortion. We can see it is limited by the height of the 500 pixels. And here's the CSS for cover. Here is how cover will display. The image is scaled to fill the space. As a result, parts of the image are cut off. Background size can also be specified by indicating a width and/or height with the values as percentages, lengths, or auto. Auto will scale maintaining proportion. Width only. In this case, the height defaults to auto. Background size 75%, background size 200 pixels, background size 20 ems, background size auto. Here is the HTML of our demo file for specifying the width only. We will look at examples of using percentages, pixels, and ems. This is the CSS. The question mark is used to indicate that these can change depending on our example. In our first example, we are looking at a background size of 75%. In our second example, we are looking at a background size of 200 pixels. In our third example, we are looking at a background size of 20 em. Width stated first and height stated second. Background size 50%, 75%. Background size 500 pixels, 250 pixels. Background size 20 em, 40 em. Background size auto. Here's the HTML of our demo file for specifying the width and the height. We will look again at examples using percentages, pixels, and ems. This is the CSS. The question mark is used to indicate that these can change depending on our example. This is the CSS for using auto for the width and 50% for the height. And this is the CSS for using auto for the height and 50% for the width. In our first example, we are looking at a background size of 50% and 75%. In our second example, we are looking at a background size of 500 pixels and 200 pixels. In our third example, we are looking at a background size of 20 em and 40 em. In our fourth example, we are looking at a background size of auto, set for width, and a height set at 50%. So the displayed image is limited by the height at 50%. In our fifth example, we are looking at a background size of auto set for the height and the width set at 50%. So the displayed image is limited by the width at 50%. The size of multiple background images can be controlled using commas to separate each instruction. For multiple background images, background size, auto, comma, contain. Here is the HTML for the example, and the CSS. This is saying that the first image has a background size of auto width and auto height, while the second image has a background size of contain. This is how this would look visually. The seagrass image is scaled the largest it can be in the container. So in this case, the height of 500 pixels is the limitation, and the palmetto displays on top and displays at its native size. Note, auto would be distinct from auto. In the former, we are saying the width of two separate images is set to auto, while in the latter, we are saying the width and height of one image are set to auto. This is an HTML for an example using auto, and the CSS. And finally, the visual result. The image has a native width of 400 pixels and a height of 328 pixels. Since the container is larger, the image will display at its maximum native width and height with a background size of auto. Presented by Designers Learn Code.